The film opens with a large crowd gathered outside a butcher shop, eager to buy what's rumored to be a unique and exotic meat that no one has ever tasted before. The people are willing to spend anything to get their hands on this delicacy, such as its appeal. Days pass into weeks, yet the crowd shows no sign of thinning. In fact, it keeps growing. Even law enforcement and political figures have joined in on the craze. Then, one day, a curious buyer finally asks the question on everyone's mind. What animal does this meat come from? The male butcher replies, claiming it's pork, imported all the way from Iran. Word quickly spreads throughout the neighborhood, sparking even more interest and making the shop even busier. Butchers who once struggled to get by are now raking in a small fortune. Meanwhile, bigger meat suppliers are being forced out of the market due to the overwhelming demand. We are then shown how this modest butcher shop rose to fame, operated by Vincent and Sophie, a couple with a passion for their craft. The shop is located on the outskirts of Paris. That's Paris, France, in case you're wondering. On the surface, their lives appear to be going well, but behind the scenes, things are far from perfect. The shop attracts very few customers, and those who do come in are put off by Vincent's unusual habit of massaging the meat. One day, a group of masked vegans storms the shop. They splash blood on the couple and vandalize the place before running away. Enraged, Vincent chases after, managing to catch and tackle one of the attackers. After a brief struggle, he unmasks the activist. However, the rest of the group returns and helps their companion escape. Before leaving, they also assault Vincent, leaving him fuming with anger. Maybe Vincent should spend more time lifting weights, less time fondling meat. Later that day, the couple heads over to their friends Stephanie and Mark's house for lunch. In the kitchen, Sophie breaks down in front of Stephanie, explaining how the bank turned down their loan request and that they're on the verge of bankruptcy. At first, Stephanie tries to console her, but she quickly shifts the conversation to brag about how well her husband is doing financially. It turns out that Stephanie and her husband, Mark, also run a butcher shop that's thriving. During dinner, Vincent brings up the incident earlier when his shop was attacked by vandals. Mark first teases him for not having any security measures in place. Then he presents Vincent with a rifle, telling him it's for protecting the shop from vegan extremists. Though Vincent doesn't have a gun license, he takes the weapon without hesitation. After all, the vegans won't care. At least these bullets aren't made of animal products. On their drive home, Sophie confesses that she's been contemplating divorce, claiming their marriage has lost its spark. Ever the practical man, Vincent chooses to ignore her entirely. That's when he spots one of the vegan activists responsible for trashing the shop earlier. Determined to make a point, Vincent throws the car into reverse, attempting to run the guy down. However, he loses control and accidentally kills them. In a panic, he considers calling them to report it as an accident, but Sophie stops him, fearing they'd both end up in jail. Instead, she suggests they follow in the footsteps of a serial killer named Michel Francois, who dissected his victims and scattered the pieces in garbage bags across the city. Vincent, realizing his wife might be watching too many crime shows, reluctantly agrees. Besides, maybe they can turn this guy into profit. That night, he brings the body to the shop and begins to butcher it. During the process, an ear drops to the floor, and Vincent's dog devours it instantly. After spending hours cutting up the body, it gets late, and Vincent decides to dispose of the remains in the morning. The next day, he oversleeps and is shocked to find the meat missing. As he frantically searches, Mrs. Quenya, a regular customer, shows up at the shop. She tells him how much she enjoyed the meat Sophie sold her and that she's back to buy more. Unbeknownst to Vincent, Sophie had accidentally sold the human meat to Mrs. Quenya, mistaking it for pork. Stunned, Vincent tries to convince her to buy something else, but the customer insists on having what she got before. As they argue, Sophie becomes intrigued and insists on trying the same meat herself. Unable to tell the truth in front of the customer, Vincent reluctantly hands his wife a piece of the human meat. To his shock, Sophie loves it, which only makes Mrs. Quenya more eager to buy some. Finally, Vincent spins a tale about how the meat is a rare specialty imported from Iran, which explains its unique flavor. He grudgingly sells a portion of the meat to Mrs. Quenya, and after she leaves, reveals the truth to Sophie. Surprisingly, Sophie isn't disturbed by the fact that she's eaten human flesh. Instead, she proposes they sell it, suggesting it's the easiest way to dispose of the body. As expected, Vincent is horrified by the idea and prepares to throw the meat away. However, before he can act, another customer enters the shop asking for the same meat that Mrs. Quenya bought. Gradually, the so-called Iranian meat becomes a hit in the neighborhood, and the couple rakes in a fortune selling. With the demand skyrocketing, Vincent's curiosity grows, and later that night, he takes a piece of the meat home to try it himself. Vincent reluctantly tries the meat, but to his shock, he ends up loving it. Soon after, Sophie approaches him with vegans have exceptionally pure blood, which makes their flesh taste superior. She then proposes that they start hunting vegan extremists and selling their meat to make even more money. Vincent quickly shuts her down, calling the idea absurd and unethical. Before going to bed, he also tells her to Quit watching those serial killer shows. The next day, their daughter Chloe brings home her boyfriend Lucas for lunch. The family serves a lavish steak, but Lucas immediately declines. It turns out he's vegan, and out of respect, Chloe refuses to eat as well. After the couple leaves, Vincent and Sophie realize that all the effort they put into the meal was wasted because of veganism. Frustrated, Vincent finally agrees to go along with Sophie's plan to hunt vegans. When a vegan is dating your daughter, it's time to turn him into dinner. That night, the couple heads to a vegan restaurant and marks the owner as their first target. They tail him for a while, and Vincent even manages to break into his apartment with a cleaver. However, at the last minute, he loses his nerve and backs out. With their first attempt a failure, Sophie becomes determined and insists they need more practice. The next day, they return with a more calculated approach. Posing as fellow vegans, they join a protest outside a supermarket to scope out a potential target. Eventually, a scrawny guy approaches them, praising their activism. Sophie convinces him to meet up later in a parking lot so that they can discuss vegan stuff. As per the plan, the couple heads to the spot early and rehearses different ways of killing their target. Soon, the vegan arrives in a van, but to the couple's dismay, he has brought some of his friends as well. Because of this, Sophie and Vincent are forced to abort their plan. After a while, the vegans reveal that they are going to raid a meat shop, so they ask the couple to tag along. Afraid of being exposed, Sophie and Vincent reluctantly oblige. Along the way, they lie about their current identities and mention that they are florists. After reaching their destination, the butcher couple realizes that the meat shop belongs to their own friends, Mark and Stephanie. Sophie starts doubting the idea, but Vincent, who is clearly envious of his rich friends, enters the shop and starts trashing it with the vegan. And so, in the next scene, the couple goes to a restaurant to have dinner. There, they discuss ways to hunt down victims without arousing suspicion. However, they disagree over something and soon get into an ugly fight, causing Vincent to angrily storm off. As Sophie sits there alone, a waiter takes advantage of the opportunity and hits on her. Sophie realizes that they have similar interests, and after a while, the waiter takes her out on a ride. When they arrive outside Sophie's home, things get romantic and the two start making out. However, when Sophie finds out that he is a vegan, she purposely bites his tongue, causing it to bleed. She then invites him inside to treat his wound, to which the waiter obliges. While the guy is inside the bathroom, Sophie walks up to Vincent and briefs him on the situation. As expected, the latter gets nervous and refuses to do it, but the cunning lady starts blackmailing him, saying that she will sleep with the waiter if he refuses to kill. Upon hearing this, Vincent loses his temper and begins to sharpen his knife. But at the last moment, he again chickens out and urges his wife to let the man go. However, Sophie has some other plans. She purposely gets the man naked and proceeds to have intercourse. This finally riles up, so he beats the poor man to death. I get that this movie is a metaphor or whatever, but geez. The next day, Sophie gets a call from her friend Stephanie, who tells her about last night's vandalism. The butcher couple immediately reaches the scene, pretending to be concerned. There, they see Mark arguing with a police officer. It turns out he is the same officer who is investigating the vandalism of Vincent's butcher shop. Afterwards, the officer asks to speak to Vincent privately. Vincent initially panics, but soon, it's revealed that the police officer has also heard about the famous Iranian pork, and he wants to buy some. Eager to earn more money, Vincent promptly says yes, and later that day, the couple again sells human meat. Numerous customers line up for the product, and as a result, it gets sold out within an hour. Hence, they decide to make vegan hunting a regular thing, and with the help of some deadly weapons and sophisticated techniques, they begin a daily killing spree. By the end of the week, they increase the price of the meat and generate a high profit. One day, while on lunch with their friends, the couple bring along the fake Iranian pork. And like the previous customers, Stephanie and Mark also immediately fall in love with the taste. But suddenly, while chewing on the meat, Mark bites onto something metallic. Stephanie, who is a former nurse, instantly recognizes the object as a pacemaker. It turns out that one of Vincent's victims had a pacemaker installed in their heart. He somehow manages to defuse the situation, but the competition between both the couple's meat shops initiates an argument, which quickly turns into a physical fight. The husbands begin tussling on the ground, and all of a sudden, Vincent bites off Mark's ear and starts chewing on it. He then spits the ear out, gives Mark a menacing look, and leaves with Sophie, much to everyone's horror. Sophie and Vincent continue killing humans and rake in huge profits. On top of that, their dying marriage is also now saved. One day, the couple attends a vegan festival where Vincent notices a little chubby boy. The cannibal can't resist the urge to think of ways to butcher the boy for his meat. Soon, it dawns on Vincent that he has turned into a psychopath. Disgusted with himself, he decides to leave. However, Vincent and Sophie run into their daughter Chloe and her vegan boyfriend Lucas, who is surprised to see them at a vegan gathering. As they chat, Lucas mentions that several vegans are disappearing as of late. He is sure that it is the work of butchers. When Vincent tries to refute the assumption, Lucas gets upset. He loses his temper and yells at the butcher couple, compelling them to leave the festival. Unfortunately, one of the vegans who previously accompanied the couple to Mark's meat shop overhears the fight and gets stunned to find out that they are actually butchers. Outside the festival, Sophie sets her eyes on a chubby woman and asks her husband to kill her. Sadly, because of the earlier fight, Vincent has regained his vigor to kill people. After finishing the job, they head home. Later that night, as Vincent is butchering the woman, someone knocks on the door. Unfortunately, it's the police officer. Vincent warily opens the door and the two start chatting. The officer reveals that 10 vegans have gone missing, and the butchers have become the prime suspect. Suddenly, the cheeky dog appears and walks behind the officer with a human hand in his mouth. Vincent panics, but he quickly sends the dog away by shouting at him. This puzzles the officer, and Vincent covers it up with a fake story of him suffering from PTSD since the last vegan extremist attack. Soon the officer leaves, but Vincent gets a feeling that he is onto them. He shares his concerns with Sophie, but she assures him that they cannot get caught since they have gotten rid of all the bodies and there's no evidence against them. It turns out that Vincent has gotten rid of all the meat of their most recent victims, either by selling them or by scattering them around the city in garbage bags. They have taken these steps in the wake of greater awareness on social media and intensifying search for the missing people. Suddenly, the doorbell rings and the couple find Lucas at the door. He greets them and apologizes for misbehaving with them at the vegan festival. Lucas then explains that he's been very stressed since his vegan friends started disappearing. The cunning Sophie comforts him and signals her husband to make Lucas their next victim. However, Vincent refuses and instead escorts their soon-to-be son-in-law to the door. The next day, without consulting with Sophie, Vincent announces to his customers that he will no longer sell any Iranian, much to everyone's dismay. This results in an argument between them, causing Vincent to leave the shop along with his dog. Meanwhile, the vegan group that destroyed Mark's meat shop shows up at Vincent's place to take revenge against them for the betrayal. Sophie tries to send them off, but without success. Instead, they tie her up and beat her to a pulp. When Vincent returns from his walk and sees the vans outside, he realizes that something is wrong. Wasting no time, he enters the shop with a cleaver and sees the vegans about to kill his wife. Enraged, Vincent intervenes, and with the help of his dog, he murders 2 of them. One vegan manages to impale Vincent in the shoulder, but luckily, Sophie unties herself in the nick of time and finishes him off. The movie then ends as the couple are arrested with 30 murders to their name. It's revealed that Mark and Stephanie were the ones who reported Vincent's odd behavior to the police, which eventually led to the butcher couple getting caught. Due to the severity of their crimes, Sophie and Vincent get a death sentence.